Hello, welcome back to another All Gathered Up, the show that runs parallel with the Great British Sewing Bee, and each week we look at a specific skill or a topic that comes up and delve into it a bit deeper because they don't have the time to do it each week on the Sewing Bee, and some people are like, oh, I want to know more about that. Well, that's us, and that's what exactly we do each week, and we do it as well because we have Carol Elaine, Master Tailor Couturier, that joins us each week to help us understand those new topics or skills and help us to learn a bit more. Good to see you, Carol. Week 5.
Hello, Stuart. I think we're halfway through now, aren't we?
Absolutely. I know, the weeks are whizzing by, aren't they?
They sure are, in a scary way.
And it's boiling hot too. The sun is streaming in here. Are you nice and hot in your studio?
Definitely. I turned the pressers off early today and let everyone go home.
Oh, wonderful.
Before the rush hour started. Yeah, it's necessary.
So I'm from sunny Suffolk. Carol's in London, and we beam across the world for you to watch. And aren't we getting some lovely comments on the videos? I see you were busy
Yes.
this week chatting away.
I was indeed. I mean, I really love that interaction, and it's so nice that people write in and they say, whatever's on their mind, and whether it's got to do with sewing or whether it's got to do with the latest episode or
It's lovely.
just anything. It's a lovely forum to just chat about sewing.
Absolutely, and all over the years, this is I think our third year. We've learned an awful lot of skills and techniques. Some have reappeared and we've gone over them again, and I know during the first round for this week they had to make a modernist inspired skirt, and we saw lots of gathers there. Well, if you want to know more about gathers, I shall put the link in the bottom of this video because Carol did a superb demo, I think it was last year, on gathering, didn't you, Carol?
I did. I remember that one very well. And that addition of that second line, right? So you have
Absolutely.
two gathering lines. So it takes the risk out of it. If one of the threads break, you've got the other one, but also it concentrates the gathers in a more ordered way. So you don't have one line with gathers on both sides, which is hard to control.
So you can see that tutorial, but for this week, because it was all about Art Week, and some of those skills in sewing when you're more creative means that you're going to have to do that good old technique called appliqué. Well, that's how I call it. I know because a lot of Americans like appliqué, and you word it slightly different. How do you say it, Carol?
Well, it
Or do you
kind of rolls
change?
off the tongue as applique.
Appliqué, yes. I think,
Applique.
so appliqué or appliqué. I think
Applique.
it depends on where you come from or where you put the stress on which vowel. I think that's the way it is, isn't it? But it's the same
Yeah.
skill, same technique. So however you say it, it doesn't matter. Is it a skill, Carol, that you like?
Very much so. And when I saw this first challenge, I was really excited. This is different. This is painting with fabric. This is filling a canvas with fabric. And this is completely alien to what we normally do with a mannequin, where you're trying to make a shape to fit the human body. This is painting on a canvas and filling a canvas. And this
Lovely
is a whole
idea.
different skill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
This is the eye. The eye works in a whole different way.
yeah, because you're not even making the garment at this point, so you're not doing any sculpturing as such, are you? As you say, you're making the fabric, you're painting the fabric to make it look wonderful. Then you're going to make the garment.
And a lot of the great painters and the artists we admire the most, they know how to fill the canvas.
Yeah.
How to make that interesting. Now, that doesn't mean you plaster it with detail and motif. It can be very simple. But it reminded me of a course I took. In London, we have what's called the London Drawing Group. And they do Zoom classes. And over lockdown, I took several.
Did
in
you?
painting with paper. So, and Matisse did this a lot. If you know some of his work, he did some beautiful work with birds. And it's very simple, a blue background and white birds. And he just took his scissors and he moved the paper and just cut non-stop. So when you turn the paper, you're now cutting something upside down.
Oh,
Or you're
wow.
cutting the right side of something or the left side of something. It's very tricky to do, so you've got to kind of see the whole of the canvas
Yeah.
before you put the scissors to the paper. But this is what it reminded me of. It was, and it was such a different challenge. We've never seen anything like this.
No, and I just come from doing the show with Ting on Unpicked, and I have to say, I was first of all as an artist. Well, a very amateur artist, but I also taught art as well. I was very excited for this week, and also this first challenge excited for, because I felt that the criteria was wonderfully pinpointed. If I can quickly go to this, there we go. Because they were told to make a modernist-inspired skirt, so quite free there with the idea that you can be inspired in so many ways. But let's look at that, and I've got my trusty pen here. It was this that I thought was really pinpointed, the brief. And we haven't had this much over the season or seasons of Sewing Bee, but you've got the taffeta fabric interfacing, but you've got 10 fabric shapes. So what was really nice was to see how they're going to use those 10 fabric shapes and how they're going to use applique. And from the sewer, I felt when I was watching it, I'm able to judge that quite fairly because I can see how they've used their 10 fabric shapes and then how they've appliqued. So I think it must have been quite almost I can't think of the word, relieving for the sewists, because, right, I could do this skirt, I could do my gatherings, because I've done those, that's a good skill, and now I can do this applique. But from a viewer point of view, I felt it'd be good to judge. What did you think?
Yes. Oh, here's an interesting thought about the picture that they're given. So you see a flat, the skirt looks flat. There's
Yeah.
all 10 shapes, and they're just lying flat. Well, what happens really, in effect, what happens when that skirt is made and all that folded fabric goes in on itself? It's going to
Good point.
erase. It's going to
Yeah.
erase half of those. So this challenge was about understanding, even though you're painting a big canvas, you're filling a big canvas, what happens to it when it concertinas?
Yeah.
So you're going to lose. You're going to lose that flat,
And-
things being next door to each other.
Yeah.
It's going to fold in.
And also, as you said, that's not that camera yet. Let's go back to this one and I'm getting carried away.
Slight preview of what we're going to talk about.
It's right. But also, because you said you were painting, isn't it interesting that this drawing, they're all next to each other? There's no overlapping or anything yet, is there?
Yeah.
So that's quite well, perhaps not so modernist inspired there. Perhaps they didn't want to give any clues away on how to place those shapes.
Sure, I think they were saying, here's your shapes, and you do what you like with them.
Yeah.
Now, did I see that some people said, okay, I'm going to use a circle, but I'm going to cut a bigger circle here and a smaller circle there?
Yes, yeah.
So they were allowed to enlarge the shapes. Yeah, and people did tend to put them in isolation. They didn't overlap them to make new shapes, did they? Which I thought might have been an interesting idea. But we didn't see that. Maybe you're right. They were guided by the drawing.
There could have been, and also, sometimes with these inspired rounds, if you don't know the topic, you're a bit scuppered. So I'm an artist, so I kind of knew a little bit about the modernist period, but some sewers may not have done. They might have just taken modern to be literal, like, well, grey is very modern at the moment. It's the new beige, so I'll just have greys and perhaps keep it kind of monochromatic as modern. So that's a difficult one there, because not everyone knows everything in art or any topic, do they?
That's true. And if it was about modern industry or the modern way of life or modern tools or the modern customs and practice, well, that's one thing. But if they didn't know the artists themselves and what their portfolio looked like, then they would be a little at sea here. And they would be thinking, oh, what's modern? What's in the shops?
Okay, let's go into the applique then, because that, if I just go to this shot, so we can see, here we go, so we get an idea of what they were doing. Let's cover that one up. That's the end result. The applique is, as you say, Carol, the painting. It's the adding of stuff to the actual fabric. So that was with the shapes. What is there a basic, most fundamental a way of approaching applique?
I think that is very interesting to ask that, because you have to understand the fabric that you're using as a base cloth.
Okay.
In this case, it was taffeta. It's very perky. It's a stiffer cloth. It has an active bias, but it's pretty taut on the straight and the cross grain. So it's a stable fabric. It's mostly iridescent. Some taffetas have flaws, slubs that you'd have to sew over. So that's just understanding your base cloth. And then, most importantly, then second is understanding the fabric that you're appliquing with. Okay. So if you're going to be appliquing a felt motif on taffeta, well, then that's going to be very easy. Why? The felt is stable. The felt doesn't fray. The felt is sympathetic to the needle going through, and it takes that very easily. If you're going to then
so the felt then wouldn't show the holes at all, would it?
No, and and it would accept the needle. It would be very forgiving. It wouldn't fight. You know, sometimes if you're piercing a silk or piercing a taffeta, a very springy fiber, the needle, if it goes in between the fibers, it pulls.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't go in easily. Well, felt has no weave, so the needle's going to go in very easily. It's just going to find its way in. There's, no cross threads to fight with. So that's going to be easy. If you're going to, as some other sewers did, and we saw the trouble spots, if they're going to use a more fluid cloth that frays and try to put that onto taffeta, you saw the problems, right? Because they were trying to zigzag and cover up a fraying, circular edge.
Yeah.
We're going to show you some tricks about how to get out of that trouble in a minute. Yeah.
Okay. Now, I do applique in patchwork because, as you rightly say, it's painting. You're laying fabrics on top of fabrics, and I know a couple of approaches with my sewing machine. I suppose the basic one, now you've spoken about fabrics, is what stitch to do, and it's a zigzag. But I suppose there are many other types of stitching you can do as well, aren't there?
Mm-hmm. Well, if you have one of these fancy machines with loads of different stitches, a string of daisies, a string of hearts, a complicated zigzag in a box stitch. When I was setting up the tutorials, I realized that I'd lent 3 of my domestic machines to students for this week.
Don't worry.
So I know. So I'm going to be appliquing with a straight stitch machine today, which is fine. That's okay, as long as you understand.
Yeah.
What the other thing is color. I forgot to mention that. If you're appliquing an orange circle on black fabric, well, use orange thread.
Yes. Yeah.
Match the thread to the piece that you're appliquing on, and that way your stitches aren't going to show. And also be careful of the bobbin thread, because if you have orange in the upper thread, you need orange in the bobbin as well.
Yes, because you might see those little bottom thread coming through, mightn't you? Yeah.
That's right. Now we're talking about zigzag, and the closer you put the length together, so the smaller the length, you've got width, and you've got length. The smaller the width, okay,
so you want it
the closer they're
like
together.
That. Yeah.
Okay. So that is it's better if you can work that in. Now that all depends on the shape and the fabric you're using. But if, like the first line, the zigzag that you drew, which is quite wide.
Yeah.
Okay. Now that gives you a lot of opportunities for the fabric to sneak through into those
Yeah.
V's, okay, and pucker.
Yeah. Yeah.
So a real satin stitch is the stitches are
It's
so close together
yes.
in length that you
It's
can't
almost
tell. That's
it's
it.
almost like
Exactly.
that. So
Yeah,
it then looks like a basically a block of color. So
that's it.
as you say, if you're
Yes.
using
Yeah.
orange thread on an orange shape, that will look beautiful, won't it?
Yes. And then you can adjust your length and your width. So maybe you don't need a huge width
No,
because
you
your
could.
fabric isn't going to fray.
Yeah,
That's correct. Absolutely fine. And if you're using like a felt, then that's all you need. If you're using and we'll talk about that. If you're using a fabric that frays a lot,
yeah.
um, then use a wider zigzag. And then I didn't realize it when you showed me the envelope with the pattern inside.
Oh
They
yeah, sure.
actually
Have a look at it.
gave them
Yeah.
interfacing. So they gave them interfacing with the packet. And I noticed that some of the contestants used interfacing to back their motifs, others didn't.
Ah, right. So the interfacing then would have meant because they were told they can use these were all scraps from the scrap bins in the corner, I think, weren't they? So
That's right.
some of those fabrics were probably too thin then, so that's why the interfacing was given to them to firm up your applique piece. Is that right?
Yes, they wanted you to back your applique piece with interfacing to give it that stability. And
Right.
also so that the needle, again, what we talked about with felt, the needle would find a way in and it would have that extra support. And I
Yes.
think the one that comes to mind is Lauren. Lauren
Yeah.
had, I think, a black applique onto a green, and she got into trouble because she didn't support her
Yeah.
motifs.
Yeah. If I got a close up of it here.
There
Yeah.
you are, you see. Now, I don't know if she used interfacing, and if the interfacing was white, she might have been um, uneasy about that because, the white might have shown because
This.
she's using two darker
Yeah.
colors.
Yeah. So I suppose when you said about colour, I'll put that up there so I remember. You could argue because this was a modernist inspired skirt, because of modernism and the use of colour, they actually could have used contrasting colour, couldn't they? Which is kind of
Sure.
what.
Yeah.
Well, she just used the green to match that. So I suppose at some
Yeah.
points it depends on what you're making, doesn't it? Whether you want it to blend in and be a feature, as in what you're painting, or whether you want the thread to talk as well.
It's exactly correct, and you could have used if you had your satin stitch well under control, and
Yeah,
it suited the applique and base cloth. Well, then you could have introduced a third color. Really, I'm saying you have to match, but that's if you want invisible work. But you could also use a
yeah,
satin stitch as a contrast. But I think
absolutely.
this submission was really it was a more sober offering,
Yeah,
wasn't it? And
absolutely.
I think she said I don't want to wear anything too bright and colorful
Yeah.
because it's not age appropriate for me. She didn't feel
Well,
comfortable with that.
absolutely. And if we go back to the group, and this is what I was talking to Ting about, that actually modernist, yes, they have colour, but because of the shapes and the colour, you're close to it looking like a panto or a theatrical
Yes,
garment or a kiddie's garment, aren't you? So it's
absolutely.
so I can see from that point of view, this is and Tony's. It's
Yes.
modern because it's of the way we see colour now and classy greys and black and that teal. That's modern, isn't it?
Yes, and there's a sophistication about that. It
Absolutely.
isn't it isn't boastful. It's notice the wearer.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
don't notice the dress, notice the wearer. That's a very modern way of thinking
Yeah.
about clothes. It's almost a unisex idea, almost the monotone idea.
Yeah. I've got, whilst we're talking about applique, before we go into seeing your work, because Lauren was at one end of the scale, sadly the bottom end in the rankings, and because it was the appliqué that kept coming back to, which was refreshing for us, as I say, as an audience member, I can see what Patrick is saying here with the appliqué, and I can see why that one's not so good and why that one's more successful. Let's take a look at Lizzie's appliqué, and you'll notice her edges straight away on how clean and smooth they are in comparison,
And
can't you?
she's, yes. Now it looks like I can't tell from this photograph if she's used orange zigzag on all her.
She has. Oh no, she's used orange thread on this one, and so orange, and then on this one she's used purple. So she has used or pink,
right.
pink and purple. So she has used contrasting threads for sure.
That's very clever. That's extra points for that, for introducing a contrast color, I think.
But if you can see the zigzag there, it certainly worked better because it's so smooth. There's no sort of creasing or puckering of the taffeta anywhere, is there?
No, and I think she's prepared her work very clever. I did notice that the equipment they're given they're using a free arm machine.
Oh, right.
So the press-a-foot and the sole plate, that's all high above the table. Well, not high, but it's higher above the table.
Yes, it's not flat like your industrial.
Yeah. So they're feeding their work upward, and then it's falling down behind the machine. So if you're working like that and you've got a small area, you have to prepare what you're sewing very well. That means a lot of pins. Yeah. You have to make sure that applique is very secure, especially if it's a circle.
And you've got the gravity as well, because when it's hanging over the edge, that's pulling, and you have to then try and put your hand underneath it to try and keep it flat. If you've got a bed, it makes such a difference, doesn't it? In sewing in general.
Oh, gosh. Yes, absolutely. And this skirt had miles of fabric in it. So if you have an applique on the lower left side of the skirt, all the rest of the skirt is to the top right. Yeah. And that has to fit into that small space in the machine. So it's tricky to maneuver.
Let's also not forget, Carol, zigzagging on a straight line is easy, but zigzagging on a circle, that's a skill anyway, isn't it?
Yeah. You have to understand how far to the right the needle is going to go. Yeah. Because that needle going to the right has to plant itself right on the outside of the applique edge. Yeah. And that's what you have to understand. And if you don't get that, so in that smaller piece, the navy blue piece with the pink. Yeah. The pink, that smaller one. Yeah, that one there. So the needle, she hasn't got the needle to the outside of the applique. So her zigzag is on the inside of the applique. Yeah, so if I try and draw that bigger, let's draw the bigger shape. So she's got her zigzags like this, hasn't she? But ideally, you want it a bite into the fabric and a bite off the fabric, yeah? Perfect. And then you might, as you get to the corner, you may have to walk the machine so that, and change and come down and then go right up into the point of that shape with the right side of the needle. There you go. So that you just, you catch that point. Yeah. That's it. And that takes a lot of maneuvering. You've got to understand the machine, and you have to understand how the needle is going right to left. And that's a skill. Oh, let's clear that. That's a skill for any sewer to achieve, let alone on a show when you've got 4 hours of time. So it's not a skill that you can rush really when you're doing applique. Not at all. Now you've got 10 shapes, and if you're Lizzie and you're changing colours, think of how that adds time on. Yeah. So. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, then. So are we good? Let's go over to Carol Cam and see what you've got ready for us. Let's have a chat. Okay. Love this. Oh, look, the sun is. We had the longest day yesterday, didn't we? And so. We certainly did.
It's
We
lovely
had
to...
19 and a half hours of sunlight in Britain. I
Oh,
couldn't
isn't
believe
it
that.
wonderful? Oh, look at that. You've got some shapes for us.
Okay. I hope everyone can see this, if this is
Yeah,
loud
it's
enough.
crystal clear
So,
at the moment, so that the internet is behaving.
oh, lovely. Thank you, Internet. Thank you for behaving. Um, I've got a base cloth here. This is some taffeta. And we know how that behaves. It loves light, it loves to be draped and
Yeah.
molded and pleated. It's very, well, I was saying before, it's very taut. It doesn't stretch much. On
It's
the
not
cross
floppy
rail.
either, is it?
It's not fluffy, it's pert.
Yeah, it's got some body to it.
It does have a lively bias, so you have to just be careful about that. Now, if I was going into the fabric bin to get shapes to applique, I would have chosen something which is as akin to felt as possible.
Okay.
So something that doesn't fray, something that is stiff on its own, and you plop that on, and it would. This is what I meant about felt being so forgiving. It's so easy to pin, you know.
Yeah.
It just goes in, and wherever you pin it, it just takes it. So, and I've just found these lovely cloth. This is a more fluid felt. This is a stiffer one. But let's say I wanted purple on blue, and I chose this fabric. Well, let's look at the properties of this fabric.
Oh, Lord.
Now, so this is a bit of a problem, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is going to be a bit of a bother. So we talked about understanding
Oh.
the base cloth and understanding the cloth you're going to applique.
Yeah.
So what I've done is I've decided I'm going to do a circle shape. There's my circle. First, I applied some fusible to it, okay, before I cut it out. And I fused a slightly bigger piece of cloth. Why did I do that? Because I wanted this shape to be a certain size.
Yeah.
Okay? So I applied the fusible first, and then when it was all set, then I traced off my shape. So I know the shape is going to be the right size.
I learned that lesson quite quickly. You can often go, oh, right, I want to cut out my shapes, and then trying to apply fusible to your cutout shape is a lot more of a faff. So just fuse your fabric, then cut your face out, your piece out. I know that means there is a bit of wastage, but it's a more pleasanter journey, isn't it?
It's a more pleasanter journey. You're right. Now, I told you that I lent my domestic equipment to a few students who are putting a collection together. So we're going to do this using a straight stitch, and I'll just see how it goes. Now, you can. How do you know that you're following a concentric line to the outside of your motif? How do you know that?
Okay. Don't know. Hard.
Yeah, it's hard. Well, your sole plate. Let's see. Let's take that out. Your sole plate with your lines here. I don't know if you've got a quarter of an inch, a half inch, 3/4. You can't follow these anymore. Why? Because it's covered with fabric. Okay, so that's gone. So the other thing you have is the presser foot itself. See, that's fine. You could do that. You could start by just following the edge of the fabric. Now I'm using a very long stitch here. Okay?
So your presser foot is following the edge of the fabric, yeah?
That's right. The outside of the presser foot is following the outside of the motif.
Yeah.
But it's a bit tricky using this big stitch.
Yeah.
Because
it jumps a lot.
Along at a faster
Yeah.
rate. So I'm just going to narrow the stitch, and then suddenly this is a little bit easier to handle because it's taking smaller stitches as it goes.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I'm going to even dial it a little bit, and I don't have to turn the fabric as much because the stitches are smaller, so it's allowing me. I might decide, okay, do I like that? Is that I still have the interfacing is showing, and that's not so good. So let's see if I can pick a different point. So I'm going to now try to find a different place on the presser foot. Now the presser foots all have a space that the needle can go through.
Yeah.
And that is, you've just got to, they're all different, all presser foots are different.
Look at
so
that.
I found a space and something that I can eyeball.
Yeah. Oh
you know,
my Lord,
I've
Carol,
not,
that's incredible.
so it's good, isn't it? And I've
That's
not had to
impressive.
pin anything. And if you look, this is very flat, and this is a bit puckery. I don't know if you can see that.
I can, absolutely,
Maybe
yeah.
you can't.
Go back,
Okay.
move that back
So,
again.
now,
Yeah.
so this part, let's see.
Puckered there,
Okay.
and then flat there,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so it's a little bit, I'm not working the camera very well.
Oh yeah,
Stuart.
I'll zoom
I'm
out a
sorry
bit.
about that.
No, that's right. I've zoomed out. There you go. I can see
Okay.
it. Yeah, I can see. You can see
So,
the difference there. That's
You see? Yeah, that's just puckering. Because the stitch is longer, so it's just puckering.
Whereas that's smooth as a.
It's very
You
smooth.
know what?
And I'm going to, I'm not going to go much smaller with the stitch, but I am going to try to get a little closer to the edge. It's very tricky to do with a straight machine. If I was doing a satin stitch, this would be much easier. But let's just see how we do.
But Carol, I'm now thinking well, this is from my very amateur knowledge of appliqué. It's almost the stereotype to do the zigzag, but you don't need to do the zigzag. That is beautiful.
No, you don't need to. Now, the other thing you can do is you can pin. You don't want to run over a pin, so you can pin this way and just encourage everything out. If you're a little bit nervous, you can thread a needle. Let me just do this quickly. It's all about preparation, isn't it?
Yeah, well, we've said this many times. Yeah,
always going on about preparation. But
my dad taught me that. You the 5 Ps. Proper planning prevents poor performance. He would always have 6 Ps,
like
and
that.
He did teach me 6 Ps, and one of them was a rude word. So you can probably guess where that is. Proper planning prevents rude words, poor performance.
Rude word. So if you've just got a couple of seconds and you want extra assurance, you can do a simple X stitch around your motif.
Yeah.
These stitches don't have to go in any particular order.
No, it's your basting, isn't it? Yeah.
It's your basting, yeah. And you can go up and down. You can make it across. You can follow your motif, whatever. But setting it up like this, either with pins, with a needle and thread, and everything then is going to come out nice. And then all you need is a little press, and there you are.
I can see it already. Viewers, look at this section here. It just flat as a pancake. And I have to say, I just thought always appliqué zigzag. But actually, that is much nicer. And because a zigzag on a circle appliqué just looked odd. It looked, it didn't fit well. Isn't it interesting that they all did zigzag? Because it's almost the stereotype of appliqué, a zigzag. But actually, no.
Yeah, exactly. And you see this railroad track of hopping across like
I know,
that,
yeah.
with your zigzag. Now imagine if that was done in purple thread to match the shape.
Absolutely.
You wouldn't see it.
No.
So, and the closer you go, then the less you have that problem.
Yeah.
Of seeing the preparation underneath. So
but
both
that
of
also
these fabrics are very.
It shows your skill, though, Carol, because that is so close to the edge. That is phenomenal.
Yeah.
But as you say, you
shots.
find you let's come back to this one so they can see us. You find you practice. So I know the whole point of All Gathered Up is to develop the skills so you can do them better. So I know they didn't have the time, but you would practice. You would cut out that small piece and you would practice your applique on a rough bit first, wouldn't you? So you could work out where you're, right, where am I looking on my presser foot? Where, and if you've got a domestic machine, you've got a more higher end domestic machine, you move your needle, don't you? Because we can do that, can't we? Yeah. Right, you try it. So this is where I always use my edge of my presser foot. Carol found her own little hole where she was measuring up. But if you've got a clever machine, just move your needle closer to the edge of your presser foot. So move it 2 points to the right. Is it close enough? No. Move it another point to the right. So that is a valuable tool, and I use that on my sewing machine all the time. I'm always moving the needle.
Oh, right. So interesting. So in tailoring and couture work, I only use a straight stitch. That's it. And so my brother, industrial, it just does one thing.
Yeah.
And I usually make buttonholes by hand, so I don't,
of course,
I don't need zigzag for that. But that is interesting. I know that newer machines, domestic machines, have loads of features on it to help you refine every technique that you're doing.
And in fact,
in the old days, you just turn the hand crank, and you maybe you wouldn't use the presser foot at all, or the foot pedal at all. You just manually turn it and line everything up right. But with those abilities,
it is phenomenal, and it is worth it. Now, you don't have to spend much money before you get that needle moving function, and I think that's more important to me than the 50,000 stitches that comes with a more expensive machine, because actually, I'm a patchworker. I don't really want those fancy stitches. And yes, they do wonderful things. And you could make really pretty applique. Like you say, you could choose one that does, shapes and floral things and stuff. But the needle moving helps you to get a lot more accurate without having to lose your guide of the presser foot. So that's what you were trying to say there. But you had to find your own guide. You couldn't move your needle there, could you?
Not at all. And it is all what they call rock of eye. It's instinct, it's intuition. You find ways to make a clear run at something.
Yeah.
And it is a bit more manual machine. But the hands learn. And if we're just straight stitching, you and I, we're straight. That's what we're asking our equipment to do for us. To have that extra refinement is great, but there's manual ways of doing it as well. So you just have to you just have to know your equipment. It's like knowing your fabric. It's the same thing.
Indeed. Anything else you're going to show us at your sewing machine there before?
No, I think that's just about it. I mean, you kindly referred to our previous tutorial about gathering, and I think if we can put that in, that would be really helpful. But this was such a different. I don't know how I would talk about how you fill a big canvas, or in reverse, how you take a big canvas and make something smaller, which is what we're going to see next, isn't it?
Yeah, well, let's just go back to the pattern challenge then. And as we've seen, so we've looked at applique. I hope that helped. You can put in the comments any questions, but just be brave with what you're doing and think about, as you say, the end result. So if we go now to the groups and we see how they've painted theirs, then that's when you, it's a great term to think of it, how are you going to paint it? Are you going to use contrast thread? Are you going to use a zigzag thread? Are you going to use a zigzag stitch? Or are you going to use, because if you're painting, you could be as bold or as discreet as you want to be. And some of them, with their painting, they have put them everywhere and have filled up their canvas, as it were. And some have been a bit more, I don't know, stylish and have put them off centre or on the bottom third. Did you have a preference of which sort of style you liked? Which ones you felt, right, yes,
naturally,
this is not...
I like the more sober offering. So I like Tony R. I really like the grey shimmer, but I like that in principle. I liked his idea.
Oh, Tony's. That's Tony W. Let's have a look at Tony W.
I know he was trying to achieve, and it all went a bit wrong. But I liked I liked the concept. Okay. It didn't work, but I appreciate it. Now that is a really good base color.
Isn't it just? Yeah.
Yeah. But it doesn't speak. It doesn't shout out. It doesn't leap off the canvas like, it was supposed to. But how could he have improved that? Maybe by doing 50 Shades of Grey, that would have worked. you know.
Yeah, maybe some pops of charcoal, maybe, I don't know. Is
Yeah.
it colour, or is there nothing that can prove it? It's because of what the judges wanted. They were saying it had to be abstract. Was it not abstract enough for the judges?
Yes, and that's true. But I liked the idea in principle,
Yeah.
as I did Lauren, and then I liked Tony Beanie Tony's very
All right.
much because I loved his color scheme. And
Let's go to. I haven't got Tony Beanie's on here, but I have got Lauren's. So let's have a look at Lauren's, which we touched at the beginning.
Again, see that to me that really spoke. Although it was a sober contrast,
Yes.
it wasn't, as she said, a childish result.
Yeah.
So I liked that. I thought maybe if she used different shapes of motifs, that would have made that more interesting. But it beautifully gathered into the waist, lovely bow. I'm sorry, I'm not picking the real vibrant ones.
No, doesn't. No,
and then
it's go on.
Yeah.
And
then
it's
I
all.
liked.
Yeah, go on. Sorry, it's my fault.
Go ahead.
When it comes to these inspired challenges, you like what you like. We all have different tastes, don't we? And it's such a broad spectrum here, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. So if we go to Beanie Tony's, which he wanted to do flame, a story of flame.
Yes, yeah. I haven't got a close up of his, but you can kind of.
Oh, okay. Well, we can see him
kind of
second
see it
to the
there.
left.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like you said in the beginning, I wasn't all for the pantomime effect at all. I didn't think those garments would be useful.
No.
But I did agree with the judges' winning pick. I did agree with Lizzie's.
Yeah, there was
As
just
the best
something
made.
about it, and if I show a close up of that one, that's Lauren's. It was everything about it. It was the wonderful gathers and the bow, but it was as you beautifully put it, the painting of the canvas. I think they were just in a stylish way Is it in the lower half or the lower? We often say in thirds.
That's it.
Is it in that bottom third? And they're kind of creeping upwards in that bottom bit. It's not too much in your face and slapping them everywhere, is it?
No, not at all. And it looked appropriate. It looked useful as a garment. And then she did integrate that leaf shape at the bottom, which helped, balance out all the circular motifs that she used.
But as we
Nice
said,
job.
and as we could see, her applique was compared to others, and this is when we got close-ups, we could go, yes, I can see that. And as I say, as a viewer, I really enjoyed the critiquing here at that point. So I can see what they're saying. I can see why this is better. When you look at that, and then you look at them poor old Tony W's applique, where you can see the puckers of the taffeta almost, and
and all the
creases.
The hairs of the fabric sneaking out. So maybe he didn't prepare maybe he didn't use the interface.
No.
And I saw the way he was pinning. He was almost pinning as he went. He didn't flatten it out, pin it or baste it, and then put it in the machine, where it would have just sewn itself.
Because there is another type of applique, isn't there? Which some of my patchworker friends use, needle turn applique, and that's even more of an exquisite approach because it's hand done, and you're turning the edge of the fabric over and hand sewing and getting a bite of that and a bite of the backing, so it turns it over, so you then get a nice edge because the raw edge is slightly folded under. There's no way you're going to be doing that here, though, are you? But because that's
not in 90
whole
minutes,
different
no.
skill.
Yeah.
But it's knowing. I suppose if you were doing this again, it's knowing, right, what are these things I could do to help? Know your fabrics, know what it does. So if he was rummaging around in the bin, he should have gone, look for firmer fabrics. But they are. You learn these things,
that
don't
don't,
you?
that don't fray. But if you've got a color scheme in mind, and there's a mad race for these trimmings and
Indeed.
fabrics,
Yeah.
and so you know,
Yeah.
if you've got to look quickly and grab what you want.
Yeah.
But I would have been interested to see what, because that was the one place that they could help the contestants out, and that was with the scraps that were in the bin to use. If they put in some felts, that would have been so interesting and easy to cope with.
And maybe they put in the harder, more floppier fabrics, knowing full well what would happen if they chose it. Ugh. Those dastardly producers. Right, let's go on to the transformation challenge, which I absolutely loved. I don't know about you. I know Ting got a bit upset because he was like, they were cutting up crochet this last week. Now they're cutting up canvases this week. It's like, what's going on? But I thought it was, I mean, look at those there. They wanted, they wanted to, Leeds Arts University, fine arts students, take one canvas and turn it into a garment, but it had to have some sort of sculpture to it. That was all it was. So Esme and Patrick were obsessed with the sculpture. They didn't say it had to have lots of sculpture, and so not necessarily means it's the best if you have loads of it, which I think was one of my arguments later on in the discussion. But they wanted to look for sculpture. Look at those there. There were some stunning sculptures, weren't there?
This is fantastic. I mean, I immediately thought, oh gosh, get out the walking foot, get a jean needle, get a second jean needle, because you're going to be sewing through paint, and it depends on how gummy it got, you're going to break threads, or you're going to break your needle. If you we saw this last episode with the crochet, where if you push the fabric through too fast or pull the fabric from the back, you're going to create this jam up with the needle. It's going to fall in the wrong place. It's going to break. So you need backup needles and a 14 or a 16 in your machine, and then just be prepared for it to not be happy with what it has to go through. And I saw, this is true when you're setting up something which is so heavy, and then it has a lick of paint on it. Well, your pin's not going to go through it at all. Yeah. You need staples or tapes or something heavier to control it. But if you made anything out of this and it worked on the mannequin, that is sculpture. Yeah. You've sculptured it. If you've done anything with a canvas full of paint, it's a sculpture. Yeah. So now this what is that? How much sculpture do they want? Which is absolutely just what you just asked. True enough.
And this is where a bit of the argument came, certainly on me chatting with Ting, that did poor old Tony W, for the second time he was bottom, was he harshly judged compared to... So he was 8th, he came bottom, compared to Lizzie's, which I haven't got a picture of, but it's basically the apron with regard to sculpture, because I know you say anything on the mannequin is sculpture, but is there more striking? Perhaps that should have been in the criteria. Striking. Is there more structure striking structure in Tony's compared to the groups? What would you say?
Yes.
Compared to Lizzie's, sorry.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And that little kimono sleeve was very well done. On the fold, and he set it in beautifully, and he's got a pleat at the bottom, it looks like. Okay, he used dressmaking techniques for this. Yeah. With the collar and the stand and everything. But there's more sculpture in that piece than the overall. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So me and Tig certainly felt, certainly a bit harsh that he was at the bottom for that, because look at, those sleeves they're standing up as well, aren't they? They're not flopping, or they're not down. I know I've got a picture of Vicky's here, who was one above Tony, well, see, this is where I know sometimes we've like, ooh, with the judges' comments, and I think I texted you, and I'm like, oh, Esme, you could have said
Yes.
something much better there, but it's like, well, it's still a lovely garment, but it's got a raw edge at the bottom, whereas Tony had binding on his, and
Yes,
it,
exactly.
it's. It, I know you've got to have judges to judge for that very reason, but it's when you think, well, when you ask for
I
a
think in
garment to have
this,
sculpture, it's like, well, one person's sculpture is another person's huge, massive sculptural piece.
yeah, you're quite right. I agree with you 100%. And I think what the judges forgot about was the brief, and I think they got carried away
Yeah,
with the
yeah,
canvas.
yeah,
So Tony's canvas was not as interesting, but he did execute sculpture in a better way than
absolutely.
the tunic and the
Yeah,
overall.
yeah,
So he made a much better job following the brief, but I think they got carried away with the color on the canvas.
yeah. But when you look at Tony's here, Tony Beanie, I loved it for a different reason. Yes, it's still sculptural, but it's not as much sculpture as this and this. But that doesn't mean it's not as good, though, does it?
Exactly. This I would have given Tony Beanie second place because I really loved this.
Yeah,
It was architectural. He would have come second. Um, and it was a play on the man's tailcoat.
yeah,
I
it was
didn't.
crisp.
So the fact that it was somebody said one of the judges said it was too long. Well, no.
Yeah,
Um, the pro
balmy.
the goal here was to use as much as the canvas as possible,
Absolutely. Was
and
that
that's
in the? It
exactly
wasn't in
what
the
he did.
brief, was it? It was to
No.
create a garment.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And this one I really liked, and I liked the proportion very much. So it
yeah,
wasn't a tiny torso with a long tail. It was,
yeah,
and he used a lot of the canvas. And in order to make those two big pleats fall into place with the rest of the garment, you needed
yeah,
some length.
yeah,
So
yeah. It
yeah,
was
that was
it.
I thought it was beautifully done. And he finished the sleeve edges, the
Yeah,
armholes off too. So it was sculpture, but he controlled it, and he had a bit
yeah.
of couture finish in it. Um,
I think it will be interesting to see what the comments will be from the viewers on what where they thought that the standings for this one, because as I say, you don't. It often is the case, even when me teaching, kids think, right, I'm doing a drama piece or an art piece, and I'm being assessed on the topic. I'm going to chuck in every type of skill, or I'm going to do loads and loads and loads. So yes, I can see why Asma's here, or let's go to a wider one actually, was stunning because of the sculpture there, but just because you have lots of a sculpture doesn't make it the best, does it? It obviously will be eye catching for a different reason, but just because you've got more of it doesn't mean it's going to be better.
no, exactly. What fascinated me about this was the perfect union of her design with the canvas, with
Yeah, it
because it was a very spirally. There was a lot of movement in it, and
wasn't there.
the more I looked at this, the more this thing started to twirl and spin
Yeah,
and move around and dance, and she just married this perfectly.
it was
So
phenomenal. Don't get
yes,
me wrong, it was phenomenal, and
yeah,
it came
yeah.
first. So I can understand. I can understand why, but it doesn't mean just because something else had less sculpture and was more discreet didn't make it, you know, as bad.
No,
So
and
I
you're absolutely right to separate that criteria.
yeah,
Asma's was staggering because of the way she used her design work to
yeah,
work with the canvas. Mia chose a very
yeah,
busy pattern, and she decided to just accordion pleat her fabric on the top, and then follow that through with a
yeah,
drape on the other side, and it just worked out very easily. And I suppose what I admire about Mia's work, the more we get into the competition, is how risk averse she is with her work. So this isn't the safest garment to wear, in the sense that Asma's is very safe to wear because everything is covered, and the straps work and everything is integrated and it's a proper garment. This was a little bit risky because it was backless and there wasn't a lot of coverage on the sides. But on a front view, it had masses of sculpture and it looked very lively because her canvas was lively. Very
And we
busy.
can't move on without talking about Lauren's, because I loved this one as well.
This is
Isn't it? It's just that the design. As I was watching it, I was like, "This is something like from Gladiator or Game of Thrones." It was. That's the back there. Incredible for 90 minutes.
And she used appliqué very effectively in this because
Yeah.
she had these shards of fabric, these shapes, and she just lapped them and top stitched them just like we were talking about appliquing with a straight stitch. And
Also, what you were saying about
it's a
choice of
beautiful piece.
fabric, knowing your fabric. She knew this was firm. It was going to stand up. So therefore, this whole design was going to be a doddle, wasn't it?
Totally, totally. She just chose her shapes, lapped them with a couple of folds, which Esme really liked, and then she had her, the displacement of shapes, so some rectangles, some triangles,
Yeah.
and this was really beautifully done. And I like, again, it's a somber statement, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which is kind of in her vein now.
But let's move on and finish off with the made to measure, because as we talked about with Inspiring, I was kind of it was going up and up and up for me as an episode, and for some reason I just felt this whole round was a bit of it felt a bit flat. It felt like it was missing something. Don't know about you, but they had to create an outfit inspired by the Surrealist movement. And I've talked about this on the other show. I've learned that lesson quite early on as a teacher. If you give a lovely open brief, which actually the kids will often love, you go make a play about Christmas. Yeah, we get to make a play about Christmas. Within 10 minutes, they're stuck because there's so much to choose from. So for this as a brief, where do you start? You're not making a evening jacket where it's nice and pinpointed so you can then go and choose a pattern. You've actually got to somehow come up with a pattern, work out what shape or garment you're going to do, then work out how it can be inspired by the Surrealist movement. It was a huge brief.
That's a great metaphor about writing a play about Christmas, because it is everything is possible.
Absolutely, and then you know what it's like. Your mind is full. How do you refine? How do you work? Work your next step out without wasting time.
And I suppose you have to think about, well, this is our chance. This is a virtuoso segment of the competition. You want to stand out. What are other people likely to be doing?
Yeah.
How do I really understand surrealism? The word absurd comes up. It's got to be wacky. It's got to be something that's completely unexpected. But yet, it has to be successful. So if you're going to do something absurd, people are going to have to get it. And it's in fabric. Now, art on a canvas is completely different. So how do you take that? How do you take a flat canvas, which we all know, and we love some of the works, the Salvador Dali's clock, but how do you animate that in a garment? That's really tricky.
It is.
So
it is.
I agree with you.
And certainly it's then, you then go down that aisle, like what I learned very early on with kids, when I did say, it's certainly in art, right, we've studied Salvador Dali for the last 7 weeks, now go away and make a picture of a final piece. You end up coming back with all the tropes to do with that. So as we then saw, classic case, let's go to the transformation challenge. That's the I need made to measure. You end up either having something very vague or then let's make it Salvador Dali, like let's slap some eyes on it. And then it becomes a bit too simple or too basic, which is horrible to say. It's such a hard round, isn't it? And this was is it contrived or too right? Oh, it's got to be surrealist, so I'll do this. Chuck some eyes on.
Yeah,
it's so hard.
I wasn't sure about it. I know, and that's a nice. It's a good way to present it. To make a simple kimono with a very rectangular sleeve. Those eyes are visible. They were placed well. Talk about where to put something on a canvas. If she had her arms up or down, you would see those. So very effective there. Mix of cloth, really interesting. But it's a top and a skirt with a couple of eyes on the sleeve, isn't it?
It is, and it's then, and you, because it's obviously inspired by, but would how many people would get it? I suppose actually many people might get it quickly because you hone in on the eyes, but some of the others are inspired by like a very small thing, aren't they? It's I wouldn't want to have judged this round at all. It would be really hard.
And those motifs, they could have been flowers as well.
Yeah,
it could have been a flower.
Yeah.
It could have been in the shape. They could be a spot on a fish. We're not sure, are we? We're not really sure.
No, it's right. It's right. So I felt for the sewers. They did an amazing job, but I don't know whether because it was then so wide, it then was either here, there, and everywhere, or it was let's just do the clocks and eyes of Salvador Dali, and I don't know. It might have been me. So I felt like even when the models were walking down the runway, it didn't. It just felt a bit flat. But I don't know about you. What did you think? Any ones that stood out?
No, I really felt the same way. Well, I'm not sure actually, because for example, this one looked Lizzie's looked like a contemporary garment.
Yes,
it looked like something that if you, without the embroidery, without the appliqué, this was just could be a modern outfit. I was really confused by this round. Totally. And I just go back to the execution.
Yeah.
So
let's have a look at the execution of Tony, because you said modern. Tony Beanie was very modern and kind of tongue-in-cheek with this idea. Surrealist. He went for that idea of, I think it was Matisse, wasn't it? Inspired. And has made a dress and has put "This is a dress" on it. Clever?
A very clever idea. Very funny. And in many ways, I like this because, as you said, the brief was so wide. Yeah. And I suppose the temptation was to copy. Yeah. To copy certain works, but he didn't do that. If the contrast was a bit higher with the lettering, I think he would have done better. Because it was hard. You had to strain to see what was written on there. But I really giggled at this. I thought, well done you.
Well, it certainly was him, and when he was talking about it, you just thought, yeah, clever, I like it. And then another one that was quite open and, I'm going to be inspired by the word surreal, so I'm going to make a cloud, was Mia. So not necessarily, going down the route of the artists of the surrealist movement. Mm-hmm. You had a different type of a surreal, a cloud.
Yes, exactly. A very simple slip dress that you could make in an hour or less. And then this idea, just wrapping loads and loads of tulle around and making some pom-poms and putting them together. She missed the center front at the hem, which that needed to be filled in. But to me, the idea of a cloud that's very clever, beautifully done. But again, this is being very safe. This is taking something, doing something simple with it to great effect, multiplying it, and there you are. So
and I think this is where, as I say, it's the annoying part of the brief. Hone that brief in, make it easier for the judges to judge. give them a bit more specific. They could have done specific things, right? We want you to make an outfit inspired by the Surrealist movement, but it must have this, and this in it. And then the sewers can go, okay, right.
So this is a high fashion garment. This is a contemporary piece.
Yeah.
These are modern shoes.
Yeah.
Modern shoes, modern hairdo. And I mean, I'm a bit annoyed with the repetition of the pom-poms, I got to admit. On the shoes, in the hair. Enough is enough. But one thing we did see is a massive variety.
We did.
The interpretations were across the board.
Absolutely. And that's what you get when you have such a wide brief, don't you?
Yeah.
But marking that is as I say, I wouldn't want to have been a judge then. Let's go to Tony W, because he was obviously bottom for both rounds. He needed a spectacular make to save himself. And I thought he was getting there with it. Let's go to the long shot so you can see it. But it did just lack something, didn't it?
Yes. Yeah. He chose two very tricky elements to work with, velvet and feathers. Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? I felt for him, because you can kind of see what he was trying to do, but it didn't. That sort of, is it like a bolero? Bolero? How do you say that? A bolero jacket over
with the feathers. It gets a bit lost, doesn't it?
Yes, it's an interesting costume, isn't it? But it doesn't reflect the brief as well as the others.
Yeah. And it's a shame, because I say when the West Africa week, when the models were walking down that catwalk, I felt the models were. They lifted some of those garments. They took them to another level. They were walking down. When they lifted their arms up, the garments suddenly spoke and sung. And the model is trying to do that here, but it still feels a bit flat, doesn't it?
Yes, she's not selling it. And I know what you mean, because I think the models are very good.
Oh, they are, absolutely. And as I say, they can turn a garment that looks a bit ropey into a stunning garment just from how they sell it. And I just felt every time these models walk down this one, it just, because as I say, that almost look. I love these side bits, these panels. Are they joined at the back? But could she not rise her hands up higher and
exactly
work it?
Yes, he's done some beautiful things with that sleeve. I'm just working it out, but the rest of the garment just sort of drips, doesn't it? Because you look at that sleeve. The sleeve is there, but this looks like is it? It's not going round to the back, is it? Is it joined into there? I think it must be a separate piece.
Because it's not
on the full circle.
It's not flapping where you can put your hand inside, is it? It's not like a bell. Do you call them a bell sleeve?
No, it seems like it's a very tight sleeve, but with this bit attached. It'd be interesting to see how that worked. It's almost like 180. It's a full circle that's bagged out, so it's 180 degrees, and then it's just sewn from elbow to wrist.
And then we'll finish off with Garment of the Week, because that might be an interesting one. Garment of the Week was Fauves, and it was the black with the white lace. And that shocked me, because I thought Asma was going to get it for the transformation round, for her sculptural, that one that we saw.
Yeah, exactly. This is very clever mixture of leather and lace. It's a great story.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Simple circular skirt with square edges, right? And then she just outlined the edges with the lace, and then put a second run of lace. But I think she sandwiched that in. Then that's a very tricky thing to execute. So she's done it really well.
She got the skill there, didn't she? For sure. Yeah.
Yes.
That must have been the hardest part. Yeah,
deceptively. Tricky to get the bodice to do what it did. So it rose up on one shoulder, didn't it? Yes. And
Did.
then it had a very clever gathering. So
I don't know
the
whether
bodice was really
is that a
beautiful
bit.
bodice with an
Is
exposed zip.
it not a bit crumpled or crinkled? Is it? I don't know whether I would have preferred it a bit flatter. Does that not a bit baggy there?
Well, I think it was a beautiful contrast to the straight skirt. So
Right.
by pleating and
Yeah.
gathering that up, and so the leather, look how it takes the light.
Yes.
Look at that.
Yeah, those
See,
panels
that's
there are
really,
striking,
that's so
aren't
effective.
they? Yeah.
Yeah. And then you've got the contrast of the gathered, the ruched top,
Yeah.
the bodice, and then that very flat skirt, which then falls into trumpets because it's a full circle. Even though it has a square hemline, it's a you cut a circle for the waist, set that in, and everything falls into those trumpets.
Okay.
It was surprisingly effective at the end.
Yeah. So you
It
can
was
understand.
a showy piece, but
Right. So you could understand why the judges then awarded it as Garment of the Week.
yes, and I think the whole look on the model with the DMs and then
Yes.
that the cloak of lace over the face.
Yeah, let's go to that long
then
shot again. Look
was
at that.
thrown back. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
wonderful. Well,
Now
there we are.
look at that.
Go
Look,
on.
go back to that
Oh,
picture. Just go
Yeah,
back to
yeah,
that picture.
of course. Yeah.
Now let's talk about sculpture. Huh? Look at that.
Yeah.
You see?
Yeah, so
It's moving.
you've got that layer and then it ripples and it goes behind there. Then you've got that one and another layer there, haven't you?
And
Yeah,
then you've got the harder sculpture, the leather, and then the softer sculpture,
Yeah.
the embellishment of the lace. And then that piece on the head, that veil that
Yeah.
sets up its own
Yeah.
sculpture.
Well-
So it's subtle.
Yeah,
It's
you
subtle,
have
but
you've
it's really tasty.
you've made me appreciate it because, as I say before, I was like, why was this Garment of the Week? So you've helped me understand that. Much appreciated.
Yeah.
Well, there we are. We've gone over an hour for all this talk. But do you know what? I'm not worried about the time because people love the conversation. They love listening to the tone of the conversation, your analytical expertise coming through as we talk about what works, what doesn't, and listening and the thinking processes. People love watching it. So I hope you're still here watching. If you are, write in the comments whether you agree or disagree or what you liked and the reasons why. And I hope the appliqué helps for future projects. I'm doing appliqué very soon. Have I got it here to show? Right, I should have thought about this. Let's have a look. Right, talk amongst yourselves. Have I got a picture?
It's there somewhere, Stuart. I think it's in the third drawer on the left.
It's a bit of a state. So I am making. Did I show you last week? Don't think I did I?
We were all expecting a lace shirt, weren't we?
Oh, that is still in the making. So sadly, not
We'll
this
wait.
week, but next week.
We'll
But
wait.
what I am working on. No, I haven't got a picture of it anywhere. So I'm working with some on Zoom every Saturday. Me and a group of sewers come together, and it's a lot of friends from America. So some are in Seattle, some are down in Texas, and we're all doing a patchwork project where we make 12 blocks, and we're then going to send them off to 12 in our chat, and each one is going to get a block each, and then I'm going to get 12 blocks back as well. But we're doing a lava lamp. Classic lava lamp, you know it?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And so we're patchworking a lava lamp, but it's done by foundation paper piecing. So it looks nothing yet, but this is the bottom of my lava lamp. This is a little highlight there, and because I'm got lots of there's Americans involved. I thought, well, my lava lamp will have some Britishness in it. But
Okay.
you know the lava lamp, your liquid that goes up.
Yes. Yes.
Well, the pattern. There we go. I found it. Can you see that?
Oh, yes.
And so that's the lava lamp. So I've done the base. So you can see this is the table. So that strip there,
Yes.
it will be this bit there. Okay.
Yeah.
But this bit here, the blob, is done with applique. So I've got to decide how I'm doing my applique. Well, I was going to do zigzag, so I've learned something today. I'm definitely not doing zigzag. I'm going to use a straight line applique.
Why not?
When I do my blobs, and I've got to choose the fabric. Well, now I've also learned I'm not going to choose a floppy fabric. I think I might find a firmer fabric, and I might actually. Now you've said felt, I might even find some felt, and do it with felt.
Why not?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So
learned a lot. Really lovely to work with. Mm-hmm.
Learned a lot today. If you like foundation paper piecing, it's a fabulous pattern. You can go on, now you've seen it, you can go on and buy it. Mm-hmm. But so I'm doing that every Saturday. So I might even be able to have a finished lava lamp in about 6 weeks' time when we finish the series. But next week, I will be wearing a shirt. Definitely. I've cut out the pieces. I've been taking pictures of it because I want to make a film for it on the next vlog. So I will be wearing a reused tablecloth out of linen as a shirt. So until then, I think we will say goodbye to everyone. Happy sewing, happy appliquing. Thank you, Carol, for your time, as always.
Thank you, Stuart.
Absolutely
thank you, Stuart.
Brilliant. Talk to us in the comments, and we shall see you next week for another version of All Gathered Up. It's Kids Week. What will we be talking about, I wonder? Little, miniature, absolutely. Thanks very much, and see you next week. Cheers, everyone.
Bye-bye, everyone. Bye, everyone.